Well, Kohberger's trial is going to go forward. We still don't have a date on it yet exactly, but his motion to dismiss, yeah, the judge said, no, we're sorry. Everything did go by the books here. The grand jury indictment does stand. Also, the house on King Road, well, it's set to go down very, very soon. Like it may be gone by the time you be watching this. We're going to talk about that as well. Robin Dreeke, retired FBI special agent, joining us to discuss the latest in the Kohberger saga. Let's talk first about the grand jury indictment that of course is standing. I don't think this is a surprise to anyone, but as you often say about the defense attorneys that we talk about, these are the people you want on your side
Yeah.
because they're trying to exhaust every area they can go down, every road they can travel to defend their client.
Yeah, they've done a good job of doing all they could to have this dismissed, and thankfully, it's not. I think the evidence is pretty, and from what we've seen, is pretty compelling. And as you and I have talked numerous times before, I think there's a lot that we haven't seen, especially in light of the House coming down.
Mhm.
Both defense and prosecution agreed to let that happen, which I really am happy for when it comes to the families. Let's just and also the community, let's start healing some pain the best we can. But at the same time, it makes me a little nervous for prosecution, only because defense seems so determined. So we'll see.
It does seem a little bit odd, and we'll talk about that house in just a second. Let's talk about the death penalty as well in this case, because prosecutors have indicated that they are still seeking the death penalty if Kohberger is convicted, and it kind of ties into the house a little bit, I think, in terms of speed of what's going on. There seems to be a lot of concern about this house standing as an eyesore. I understand that, but at the same point, we're also talking about a very serious case here. And with death penalty on the table, that does tend to prolong the process of a trial, even getting to the point of actually starting. We're going to be going through motions and motions and motions and motions all throughout this year. Maybe it'll start later this year. Maybe it'll later this year or the next. It really could kind of go anywhere. So if speed is a concern here to try and get justice as much as you can for people who have been deceased. Um, is death on a case like this still the right route to take? I know certainly we want justice served, but at the same point, if we're trying to get to a resolution here, having someone rot away in a cell for the rest of their life isn't also a very bad penalty to have if, in fact, he is guilty.
It's all it's a balancing act, isn't it?
Yeah,
Between prosecutors, families, victims, and what you can do with a judge and the defense. I mean, it's a lot of moving parts and pieces and data points to bring into bear here. And I still am on the side of families that are impacted. I'd rather have them feel whole than worry about the speed of the trial. And regardless of what happens, defense is going to be dragging this out as long as possible. I mean, she's just going to keep poking at everything humanly possible that she can. That's what she's paid to do. She's done it very well at it so far. So, and then we're going to go into the appeal process, no matter what happens, or
true.
assuming that that he's convicted of something. The appeal process is going to be long and lengthy. So,
Yeah.
I'm not you know, boy, it really depends on the people involved. You have 4 families involved. Actually 5 if you think about Koberger's family, but the victims' families when it comes to defense and whether you go for the death penalty or not. And that's a lot of impacted families to come on board with one way to move forward with the case.
Very much so. When it comes to something like this, and I don't know if you know the answer to this because I don't know the answer to this, but I'm going to throw it out there. How much weight do families have in terms of determining if the death penalty is what will be sought in this case? Right now, it currently is. But do they weigh in with them? Is that a state to state type issue, or is that completely up to the prosecution in a case like this?
I don't know because I've never been on in that courtroom in that kind of situation. I have seen, just covering things like this with you and others, that in some cases families and victims do weigh in pretty heavily, in other cases a little less so. And I think we've heard enough from families on this one that I'm thinking that they are weighing in with prosecution on this, and obviously prosecutors do talk to families. They are involved with the families, and I it's hard to imagine they're not having a big impact on how to move forward with this. And again, what the prosecution is doing is they're weighing what they can reasonably accomplish as well as what the needs, wants, and aspirations of the families are hoping to achieve as well. So they're also doing this balancing act between law, families' wishes, what they can achieve. I'm I'm really going to be interested in this case more of what the prosecution has, because they seem to have a lot more than we, as most cases do, because we don't know what the prosecution has. But I think there's a lot here that we don't know, so it'll be really interesting to see how they move forward. I think prosecution also tends to be able to do more of what the family's wishes are if they feel they have a solid case,
Mhm.
because they're able to kind of maneuver a little bit more, I think.
Yeah, I mean, and speaking of the family's wishes, Steve Gonzalez, the father of Kaylee Gonzalez, speaking out this last week, as we know, the house is actually set for demolition December 28th. So again, by the time maybe people are watching this, the house may be gone. It's a scary thing to think about that it's going to happen that quickly. Gonzalez saying we don't have a trial date yet, but we have evidence being destroyed. It seems backwards, is what he told Ashley Banfield on News Nation. Uh, yeah, I mean, I gotta agree with that statement. I mean, weighing the benefits of tearing that house down with the negatives, the cost of tearing that house down, I still don't see the equation where it equals let's tear the house down. Maybe I'd feel different if I was going to school there or working in that community and having to drive by that house on a regular basis. It's not a big town, so it would be, not difficult to have to see this thing every other day. But at the same point, maybe that's something we just have to endure. The people of Moscow just have to endure for the sake of justice for those four kids. What are your thoughts?
I'm hoping the gamble pays off in tearing it down. You've made some great points in the town of Moscow. When 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 I was taking a look at all of what we're going to talk about today on this case, I was reminded about a year ago, when we were really starting to figure out all that was going on with Kohberger being arrested. I remember taking a look at some video clips of the police that did a call on the house when there's a party there. It was a noise violation, and why I'm bringing that up, because there's an undercurrent, I think, that's in this town that we sometimes forget because we're focused on the case. And I think this is why the prosecution feels so solid in what they have. And when the officers respond to that house, there was a level of healthy communication they were having with the kids in that house, even when they were called back again later that night when they didn't calm down.
Mhm.
That was very striking to me. What was very striking was that these officers that responded seemed to have a great relationship with the college kids. They seemed to have a very solid relationship with the community. How the community came together. I've known some that I went to school in Idaho at this university, and they said it's a very, very tight community. And when you have a very tight community with good, healthy relationships like that, it allows crimes to be solved pretty rapidly because people feel safe and comfortable coming out and sharing information, which I think is why he was arrested. So when you look back at it, people didn't think it didn't happen quick enough, but I think it actually did happen pretty rapidly. And the corporal that was part of the police department that was in charge of that investigation, he did, I thought, a really good job of rallying all these agencies that were coming in as a corporal, young guy. That was kind of the single point of success or failure of this. That does also doesn't happen unless you have good, strong, healthy relationships in here. And so what I think is that as a community that is trying to heal, they've, whether it's by intent or just implication, they've implied this needs to go away because
Mhm.
we're solid as a community. And I think the evidence that prosecution has is a large result of what the community is able to bring together and filling out all these nooks and crannies of this investigation, of this case that we're unaware of, because you have good, healthy, strong people and relationships that were able to kind of flush out the evil that entered their presence. And I think that's what we're kind of seeing as we're trying to figure out the maneuverings that prosecution is doing and the tearing down of the house, and that is dumbfounding that both prosecution and defense agreed to it. But I think it's because there's such a strong cohesion in that Moscow community.
And I agree. I mean, I can see that, basically day to day life in there, where that would be the mindset. One would feel pretty confident in that. But when you get into the legal maneuverings of things in a courtroom, a jury is not necessarily always going to be your perfect representation of the community, as much as that's really what it should be. It's just not in many cases, especially when it comes down to convicting someone of murder or sending someone to their death. As strong as the community may feel about this, and they feel we don't need this house here anymore. Look, it's an eyesore. It's a memory of horrible times. Let's put something there from a memorial, whatever the reasoning may be. At the end of the day, that memorial, that getting it away so you don't have to see it every day, doesn't matter in court. It does not matter in the course of this trial. And is that just being overlooked? With not any sort of negative or malicious intent, but is that just kind of I guess, one of the things in this community that while on the surface is positive, could actually end up hurting them in the long run.
Yeah, it could, especially if they're as a community, like we've talked about before too, is if they're all in positive confirmation bias think
Mhm.
where, hey, we don't need this. And as a group, they've decided they don't need this because they don't have objectivity
Yeah,
of the courtroom, potentially. That's why I said earlier, fingers crossed that it's not
yeah,
going to hurt prosecution
yeah,
because it can. It very easily can. I don't like getting rid of pieces of evidence, especially if you're going to have a jury that you want to feel emotionally connected to what happened and walking them through, just like they did in the Alex Murdoch case, being able to walk that jury through where this happened can be extremely impactful. So we'll see.
yeah. I mean, there's so many things that can change in this case. There's so many things that can be thrown out, even when they should be in. To count your ducks this quickly and assume that he is going to be convicted on this, I think is an error. I really do, and that's where I hope that this is reconsidered. But ultimately, we'll just have to see.
And we'll see too. There's one more element in this that I'd be very curious if they bring out with technology: the ability to walk people through it virtually,
Mhm.
in an immersion type situation is also a possibility. So I'll be very curious as to whether they start doing that in
Well,
the courtroom.
and I believe that is part of the plan. That is what they were
Yeah.
doing in there with some of the cameras that they were taking. We're not talking, just going in there and filming and looking around, and we all watch a video. I related it more to if you've ever looked at like a real estate site in recent years. You can do virtual tours of homes without ever having to even go into them. If you have like a VR headset, you could even do it that way. I know you do that. I have one, and
Yep.
it is pretty neat. It is pretty amazing, but at the same point, it's not the same thing. You're not smelling it. You're not feeling it. You are seeing it. It's there, but there is still a difference. There is still a difference. There's nothing that I think will ever quite make up, for that reality and being in that true setting where those crimes took place.
I truly hope that after the verdict is stated, that you and I don't come on and talk about, boy, they should have kept that house standing.
100% agree. Hey, it's Tony Brueski. If you like the podcast, be sure to like, subscribe, and press that bell so you don't miss any of our updates on the cases we're following for you right here at the Hidden Killers podcast from True Crime Today.